YA romances might be my favorite genre to read, even if they remind me of how single I am. Hello and welcome back to my channel. I'm Angela Ann, the friend of all the good YA book recs and literary lifestyle tips. In today's video, we're going to be talking about some of my favorite YA romance books. As you all know, YA romance might be my favorite genre. I love young adult, but I also really love a good romance story. So these books are all very near and dear to my heart. I divided these books up into two categories: cutesy romances and hardcore romances, with the word hardcore in all caps. Obviously these books are YA, so they are appropriate for almost all ages. So when I say hardcore, I mean more of just, it's not cutesy, it's hardcore. I should think of a way to describe that doesn't use the words in it. It's not like a cutesy little contemporary romance. It has some sort of action element to it, or a darker trope such as enemies to lovers. Although I think some of the cutesy YA romance might have enemies to lovers too. Basically, I came up with these arbitrary category names in my head, but they do make sense to me. Let's start with the cutesy recs before getting into the hardcore ones. Hardcore, all caps. First up, we have Pride by Ibi Zoboi. I am sorry if I am saying that name wrong. This book is a Pride and Prejudice retelling, and it takes place in Brooklyn, New York. In this story, Zerny Benit's family live in a neighborhood in Brooklyn, New York. The neighborhood starts to change when a wealthy family moves into the neighborhood, striking fears of gentrification. Of course, this family has a really hot, really brooding son named Darius Darcy. I don't know if you guys are seeing the Pride and Prejudice thing starting to line up if you've read Pride and Prejudice. But anyways, Darius Darcy and his family move into town. And of course, he doesn't really get along that well with our main character, but he does have a brother who gets along really well with her sister. So the two are forced to spend time together as their siblings kind of date a little bit, and as the neighborhood has a bunch of different little social events throughout the book. This book is just a fun retelling overall. I read it all in one day last July. I think I was sitting outside while reading most of it. It's just a really great, fun summer read. I think it's pretty short too. Yeah, it's only 289 pages, so it is definitely a short read, but one you're not gonna want to miss. I really liked it too, especially if you're a Jane Austen fan. It's really interesting to see Jane Austen's story in a very different setting. If you're not a Jane Austen fan, well, then you have two books to add to your list. This book, which is a YA book, and then also Pride and Prejudice, because it is one of the best books of all time, and probably my favorite book of all time too. The next book on our list is Our Chemical Hearts by Crystal Sutherland. I actually got this book in the discount section of Books A Million, and I wasn't expecting a lot from it and was pleasantly surprised. This one is a bit of a quirky romance, and it follows a boy named Henry who is slated to be the editor of the school newspaper his senior year. However, when senior year starts, a new girl moves to town named Grace Town, and the two of them are given the co-editor's positions, which obviously leads to a little bit of static between them. Not only that, but Grace Town is a little bit odd. She doesn't shower a lot, she walks with a cane, and she wears all guys' clothing. However, the two have to work together, and they get to know each other as they serve as the co-editors, and a story that is equal parts cutesy and heartbreak. I absolutely love this story, and it is definitely not your average love story. There are things about this book that are really going to shock you or leave you kind of like, oh, that's not a normal love story. And I would say this is a really great book for people who like stories such as All the Bright Places. Next up on the cutesy romance list, we have a book which will transport you over to the UK, and that is Red, White, and Royal Blue by Casey McQuiston. It says right here, true love isn't always diplomatic. This book is about the son of the first female president of the United States and the Prince of England. They have a little bit of a faux pas / fight, and their publicist forced them to be friends in order to make up for it in the international press. As they're forced to be friends, they realize that there might be something more between the two of them. It is a little bit political. I read it right around the time of the election, which was almost a little bit stressful, but the election is done now, and so I think that is definitely a good book to read now, and I feel like if I reread read it now, I wouldn't be as stressed reading it. I just absolutely adored this story. It was so cute. If you like royals and Hallmarky royal type stuff, you'll definitely want to pick this one up. Next up, we have another story about royalty, albeit a little bit different royalty. We're talking homecoming royalty. This is You Should See Me in a Crown by Leah Johnson, and it's a story about reluctant homecoming royalty. Our protagonist Liz wants to go to this really elite college and study music, and she thinks that she has the financial aid coming in. However, at the last minute, it turns out she didn't get as much financial aid as she thought from the university. There is one way for her to make up the money needed in order to go to this college. That is to apply for homecoming court in her small Indiana town. The homecoming queen gets a giant scholarship to university. Liz, however, is kind of a nerdy band nerd. She's not very popular at school, and she doesn't really fit in with the stereotypical white, straight homecoming queen, so she definitely has an uphill battle ahead of her. She is determined, however, to win the homecoming crown and will do anything to get it. The only hiccup in the way is that she may or may not start to fall in love with the competition. This story is adorable and queer and all things lovely, and I highly recommend picking it up. This is another book I read over the summer while reading outside. Basically every weekend during the summer, I just read outside. It's my favorite. Actually, the next book I'm about to recommend also has royalty in it, but a third and very different type of royalty. It is Hot Dog Girl by Jennifer Dugan. This time we have amusement park royalty. The protagonist of Hot Dog Girl, Lou, works at an amusement park, except she works as the hot dog girl. So she has to dress up as a hot dog and serve hot dogs to people. Basically, every teenager in her town works at this amusement park, and she has a crush on one of the really attractive guys who works there. The only problem, this guy is dating a princess, quite literally, as in he is dating the princess of the amusement park. Of course, our poor protagonist Lou is just the hot dog girl. How is she supposed to compete with the princess? So Lou decides to start fake dating her best friend Celie in order to hopefully win over the guy's heart. However, her and her friend Celie start to develop feelings for each other, which makes this entire fake dating situation a little bit awkward. I made a reel about this a little while ago that I said I hated love triangles, and this book actually might be the exception to my hatred for love triangles, but it is also a bi love triangle, and I'm a huge fan of bi love triangles, especially when they involve fake dating as well. So I still would recommend this book even if you don't like love triangles. Onto the hardcore, all caps romance recommendations. Sarah J. Maas. I love Sarah J. Maas. This is the closest Sarah J. Maas book I had to me right now, although I feel like I almost always have a Sarah J. Maas book kind of close to me. And this is A Court of Frost and Starlight, which is in her A Court of Thorns and Roses series. I am going to recommend the A Court of Thorns and Roses series in this video just because I think it is probably her most romantic series. However, I've yet to read Crescent City and I really need to. It's just so big that it seems just very ambitious to me. I will get around to reading Crescent City though, hopefully this year. A Court of Thorns and Roses is a romance that involves fae. If you haven't read it already, I highly recommend reading it. I'm not going to take a lot of time to explain what the series is about because I do have a series of reading vlogs where I go through and reread every single book in that series. If you love fantasy, but you kind of want to start dipping your toes into some more romantic stories too, the A Court of Thorns and Roses series might be your best bet. The next story is published by one of my dear friends who also has a booktube, and that is Dark Radiance by Allison Aldridge. Allison is such a sweetheart and she wrote such a tantalizing hardcore romance story. It is a paranormal romance that will make you crave a pumpkin spice latte and fall sweater like yesterday. It has all the fall vibes in it. I also love this book because the main character reminds me of Caroline from the Vampire Diaries. This story is basically the Vampire Diaries if Caroline instead of Elena was the main character. This story follows Lily, who just got relocated to a foster home in a quiet, sleepy town in Colorado called Idlewild, except this town may or may not have some secrets and some brooding fallen angels. Of course, our protagonist Lily is at the heart of the drama between the fallen angels in the town, and she has to learn how to control her own powers before the town council controls her. This book is perfect for anyone who loves paranormal romance with a side of intrigue. The last recommendation I have for this video is the book that got me out of a 2-month reading slump. I feel like I am indebted to this book. It is so good. It is To Kill a Kingdom by Alexandra Christo. This book is a fantasy book with a dash of romance and a lot of enemies to lovers. Princess Lyra, who is a siren princess, offers to help a human prince who also happens to be a pirate captain find the key to destroying all of siren kind once and for all. The only catch, she's trying to murder him on the quest. A little tagline for this book is that a princess must have her prince, and that obviously takes a much darker meaning. This book involves sirens, pirates, enemies to lovers, people trying to kill each other and slowly falling in love. Basically, this book has it all. It is for anyone who enjoys fantasy, romance, especially dark romance. As I've been going through these recommendations, I also noticed a trend that this one falls into as well. I like a lot of enemies to lovers romances, which I already knew, but I also apparently like a lot of romances that involve royalty. I think half of the books I've recommended in this video in some way involve royalty, so that's an interesting trend. That is the end of the hardcore all caps romance section. I hope you enjoyed these romance recommendations. I would love to know if you're going to pick any of them up, so let me know in the comments down below. I also kind of want to do another romance recommendation video in the future because I love romance books, so also let me know what sort of romance recommendations you'd be looking for in the future. If you enjoyed this video, please consider subscribing because I post videos twice a week. Also, if you are subscribed or if you are not subscribed, I would really love if you'd give this video a thumbs up. That just helps the YouTube algorithm get this video out to more book lovers so that more of us can fangirl over these amazing books. As always, I will see you next week and down in the comments.